let's go ahead and get started, everybody. I'm Jim McCarthy. I'm the CEO of Gold Star and the host of our expert chat today. We've been doing these twice a month, as many of you know. And the focus of them has been to talk to people who know what they're talking about, your colleagues in the industry who are facing some of the same issues that we all are in terms of returning to the live venue, getting people back into shows as soon and as safely as possible. And in addition to that, of course, we at Gold Star are doing surveys twice a month, large surveys of our customer base across the country to be able to gauge how they're feeling, like what their sentiment, we call it consumer sentiment. In other words, like how are people feeling about the idea of going out to live events? And it's, you know, it's an interesting sort of kaleidoscope of different thoughts and feelings that people have. So we're going to look at where we are for the survey that we did in the end of June. But before we get to that, I want to introduce my two guests today, very distinguished and experienced people in our industry that have a lot of interesting perspectives to share on this. First, I'd like to introduce Summer Bohnenkamp. She's the VP of Programming and Marketing at the David A. Straz Center in Tampa, Florida, which is, I don't know how many spaces you guys, you got a space for any occasion, basically. And you've been there since Summer's been there since 97 in the ticket office, joined the marketing team, became senior director of marketing. After that, she was on Tampa Bay Business Journal's 30 Under 30 list and received a Rising Star accolade by the St. Petersburg Times. As VP of Programming and Marketing, she oversees all the programming at the Straz, from touring Broadway, children's shows, theater, dance, you name it, she oversees it. She built and oversees the in-house agency, which does all the stuff you'd expect it to do, marketing, promotions, etc., for the organization. And the Straz itself is consistently among the top 10 grossing halls under 5,000 seats in the whole world, not just in Florida, not just in the U.S., in the whole world. She's involved in the Broadway League Road Marketing Committee and so much more. We'll hear more from her. Please welcome Summer Bohnenkamp. Hi, Summer. How's it going?
It's going. It's good. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. I would also like to introduce Meghan Pressman. She's the managing director and CEO of Center Theater Group right here in Los Angeles. She started in 2019. And I'm guessing that the new job you thought might be a little different from what it turned out to be in 2020. But before that, you were at the Woolly Mammoth Theater in D.C., which, as a managing director, which is just one of the most innovative small theater organizations in the country. We've been working with them very proudly for a long time. She was a director of development for Signature Theater, also an innovative theater, and associate managing director of Berkeley Rep, another longtime Gold Star partner that's always doing exciting work, and so many other places. She's the vice chair of the national board for the Theater Communication Group. Please welcome Meghan Pressman. Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
I always expect like a round of applause when I say please welcome, you know what I mean? But there's not, because, you know, there should be, though. There should be some kind of, we should have a sound effect or something like that. Before we get into the data, just what's on your minds, either of you, just about where we are right this moment in terms of, well, I don't know. Let's do this. What couple of thoughts best sum up sort of your feelings on where we've come from and where we are right now with getting back into the venue?
From my perspective, things were looking up. I think we were feeling a little more positive about a month ago, and as things have been changing in the country, you know, we had plans we thought, okay, start outside. We've got a big Riverwalk stage. We thought that's safe. We can do things out there. We can open our outdoor bar, start engaging people on the Riverwalk, and at least welcoming people back, activating the campus. And then we put that off for a couple of weeks to be on the safe side. And now we've just decided that our mid-July start date probably also isn't at the safest time. So, you know, we continue to work on health and safety protocols, but ultimately we just want people back, and we want to be doing what we do, and it's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll never have a more sympathetic audience for that point of view than this one, because everybody here is in the same exact situation. We're all in the industry. Meghan, how about you?
Oh, I really echo that. We want to be back. At the same time, the universe is telling us when it's safe to do what, and we haven't heard what we need to hear yet. And trying to figure out how to balance all of the concerns for audience, for artists, for our community, and at the same time offer the things that we're hearing all the time that people want, which is the ways to engage around live performance. So we're eager to do it. We're looking to do it in innovative ways if we can, but in the moment, it's just it's a wait.
Yeah, absolutely right. So here's one of the things we do. Okay, so if you're listening along with us, when you if you go to the chat window, you might want to change the selection to all panelists and attendees. That way, everybody can see what you're typing. And so the reason I'm asking that is because I'm going to ask you a question. I want to see if everyone can just their first thought that pops into their head. You can even just keep it to one word. That right now, how are you feeling about the prospect of re-entering venues? I know all of us have been through a lot of ups and downs. How are you at this moment? What's your point of view on that in a word or two? If you want to just hit the chat box, I'll kind of share those as we go, and people can look as well. Scared and anxious, not there yet. Pessimistic, cautious but excited. All the nope. I think that means no. Concerned, worried, cautious, not ready. Vaccine. Okay, that's a good one word. In Arizona, we are so not ready to reopen. That's probably true. Need to wait, not ready yet, nothing till April. Anxious about enforcement. That's a big topic that's come up a bunch of times. Arizona's not ready. Arizona showed up today, which I appreciate. Not happening. So I think we've got a theme here. And with that, I think I'm going to switch over and share the data that we gathered at the end of June this month. So those of you who are regular attendees to this, you will know that we do this twice a month. I'll cover the goals and so forth as we go and review that. But this is where we are. So consumer sentiment for late June. We have two goals with this project that we started a few months ago. The first goal is to gauge the ongoing sentiment of the event going public, in particular, the people who go all the time or sort of all the time, because they are, as you well know, the heart of the business, where they're the ones that you rely on to make the business work, generally speaking. And the second goal is to share the information with all of you, Gold Star event partners in the industry, and really anybody who's concerned about these issues, because there's a lot to know here. We're doing these twice a month. We started in early May, large-scale surveys to find out how people are feeling about going back to live events. We do this across now, I think it's 18 metros, 17 or 18 metros, and we try to get a good representative group from every age, every metro, as broad as we can, so that if we talk about something that's happening in a metro or in an age group, there's a big enough sample that's valid. And these people are more frequent event goers than most, because they're the Gold Star members, for one thing, who are interested in doing a survey. And I think this is a really valuable group to survey. This group, 67% of this particular group, report going to live events normally, under normal circumstances, at least once or twice a month, which obviously is more than average. And some people are the freaks that we love so much who go out at least once a week. And this sample is big. In this sample, we had 3,546 respondents. So that allows us, at that scale of a survey, to be able to slice and dice that and still have good, valid data, law of large numbers, and all of that. So the first question that we ask every time, which Summer and Megan, I don't know if you've seen any of these presentations before, but the first question that we ask is, on a scale of 0 to 100, and you have a little slider bar on your survey, how willing are you to go out to live events? We put a little more festooning on that question, but that's the basic question. And this survey's answer is 37. So where 0 means no way, not doing it, not a chance, and 100 means Arizona people a month ago, we're at 37. And so this number is down substantially from the early June number. I was not surprised, because the hills and valleys of this are pretty easy to feel. It has a lot to do with how people are feeling about the virus, obviously. And here's the trend. We actually had, all of this is in a pretty narrow band, but we had this nice rise from mid-May through mid-June. I think, Summer, that's kind of where you were talking about feeling better a little while ago. And then we really just sort of shoots and laddered our way right back down to where we were in mid-May. So, reaction to this, you guys? Anything? Not at all surprising, I assume.
I'm actually surprised that it hasn't fluctuated more over time, and it's still sticking, statistically insignificant, even if there are some changes in there over time. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And when we get to the regional breakdown, there's more variation, Megan, so you'll see that. But yeah, the overall number has been in a tight range. I think it started at 40, it went down to 37 and back to 40 and up to 43. I mean, we could probably tighten the scale on this graph, but still, your point is well taken.
I'm glad it's as high as it is, frankly. It's higher than we're seeing in LA.
Well, interestingly, we're going to see the LA number here. And what's interesting about this is that it's an average, right? That means there's a lot of people who are zeros. In fact, the two most common answers are 0 and 100 to this survey. Those are the ones that people are either like, yeah, I'm good, or not a chance. But there's a lot in between as well. Anything here that surprises you, Summer?
No, I think it's validating, but I'm with Megan. I honestly thought the numbers would be lower, and that they might have dropped a little more significantly over the last month. But
yeah, that mid-June number felt. I think a lot of us felt like we were at the beginning of a positive trend, and that just vanished. So let's drill down into this a little bit more. This is one of the most interesting things for people is the metro by metro numbers. And you start with the sheer insanity that is Las Vegas. And these would be Vegas locals as opposed to tourists going to Vegas. But I don't even know how to explain the fact that Vegas people are at 66. This is,
they're gamblers.
You make a good point. They're like, I like those odds. 66 is very high. I'm going to be curious to see what they say in the mid-July survey, but we'll see. And then moving down, Sacramento 46, Philadelphia 46, Chicago 43, Atlanta 42, Houston 40, Phoenix 39, which based on the turnout today, people probably think that number is way too high. San Diego 39 and New York 38. That's a tight. There's this tight cluster here of these cities that are all in a pretty narrow band with a few loony exceptions. And then just to continue down the list, DC and Boston have been our consistent outliers on the bottom end. And for a long time, actually, Megan, you were at Woolley. DC was way below everybody else, like way below every other market. And I always thought it was just because people are like involved in the government more, so they listen to the information or something. I'm not sure. What do you think? Why would DC be low from your point of view on this?
That's a great question. Certainly it could be that there's some access to more information, although, and potentially that it's just a more diverse crowd in terms of where you come from. But I don't know. I actually was DC would be higher.
No.
You have to think about that.
And Boston, which is actually doing better, I'm wondering what the relationship is between actually doing better in terms of statistical, information and you would think they would go up together, but I have a theory that they don't, that there's actually sort of an inverse relationship to some degree.
It makes me wonder if the cities that are doing better have more cautious folks in them, and that's why they're doing better. So that carries over into their reticence. They're trying to keep on their good streak, perhaps.
Yeah.
I saw the note from the crowd about how democratic DC is. It's actually about 94% in the District of Columbia is Democratic, based on our demographics when I worked there. It's very high. So that's interesting.
It is interesting. This is the lowest number that LA has had in the 3 months or whatever of the survey, 36. LA's been as high as I think maybe 42 or 43, but this is the biggest, and that does not, as a person who lives in LA, that didn't surprise me whatsoever. I feel like we came off of an optimistic moment straight into a pessimistic moment, and as have San Jose and Seattle and San Francisco. San Francisco has been relatively low the whole time, even though they've been fairly cautious overall. So, it again, I mean, the range here, if you throw out the top and the bottom results, goes from 30 to 46. So that strikes me as kind of like, not that much of a dramatic range, but I don't know. We've been just kind of in that little 30 and 40 zone the whole time. I think it's going to be, it may be a truly milestone moment when we push out of that, either above it or below it. But it's been fairly stable in there. Okay, so then what we then asked was, that was the general question. What about if we break it down by venue size, which may or may not be super relevant from as Dr. Raccaniello, who's a virologist at Columbia, said a few weeks ago, it's less the venue size, or was it Joshua at Johns Hopkins? I can't remember. Anyway, it's less the venue size and more how closely packed you are with people, but nonetheless, from a perception point of view, we asked, how about in a small venue? How about in a medium venue? How about in a large venue? And it's just a staircase down as you go from small to medium to large. With large being now at 19, that's pretty low. But Summer, you guys are lucky you have a venue for all seasons. I mean, whatever size you want. They've got it all.
Sure.
And CTG does too.
Yeah, we range from 300 seats to 2,000 seats. So
yeah, that's right. And we'll get into this, but I think one thing to think about is like how, if at all, do you think about handling these venues differently, or maybe they're not that different, but no surprises there. And then a very, very relevant thing when it comes to this particular virus is age, as we know. And so we slice this up by age, and what we typically see is the 35 and under crowd is more optimistic. I think it's usually close. There's usually relatively little difference between the young and the middle-aged, and somehow it just kind of inverted this time. I don't know. I think middle-aged people are crazy. So we ended up with 38, and that's a big drop for the under 35s. Is that maybe because many more people in that age group are now sort of, I don't know, showing up with the virus? I'm not sure. But we also saw the 65 and older crowd drop even more to a number. This is by far the lowest number we've seen from that group. I don't know what happened with the 35 to 65s feeling. I don't know. Maybe they're just like, screw it, I'm just going for it. I'm not sure.
Maybe they have kids at home and they're really desperate to get out of the house.
That would explain it. All right. So let's see. We then sort of revised the question a little bit and said, suppose you answered whatever you answered in the first question. How would that number change if you knew that the venue you were going to was going to adhere to strict cleaning routines and do social distancing? And we got a whopping 7-point bump from 37 to 45. Actually, I think it's an 8-point bump. So not a huge jump, right? So even with that, people don't go like, yeah, all right, fine. In that case, I'm good. This is always an interesting question. We framed it differently. Summer, you talked about the outdoor part of your business. We said, okay, all right, so yeah, going in the venues, we get that. But describe your willingness to go out to live events where you live in venues or locations that are outdoors, like gardens or zoos, or that don't require patrons to be seated near each other, like museums and aquariums. And we got the lowest number that we've gotten in a while, which was 56. It's down 5 points. I think the last survey was actually the highest number we've had, which was 61 or 2, I believe it was last time. So that number was actually going somewhere sort of good, and it's retrenching. Last but not least, mostly just to make ourselves feel better, we ask, how much are you looking forward to being able to go to live events, sports, entertainment, and arts again in the future? And we got an 84, so that's pretty good. We'll take it. And that's the update. So we went down to 37, which is definitely a step down. Am I not? Just want to make sure I am not sharing my screen. Are we all good? All right. Okay. So reactions to that? Anybody? Summer? Megan? What do you think overall? What's your take on that data?
It's helpful. I love that there's a trend line to it, even if we can't figure out what the trend is, to look at changing responses over time. I'll say we're involved in several different survey groups, and we have audience segments and kind of getting surveyed as part of that. And the numbers we're seeing are much lower. The questions are kind of different, but there's a question that we're repeatedly asking groups, like similarly, how comfortable are you going out when restrictions are lifted, versus would it take if the risk of transmission was minimal, if that means therapy or herd immunity or something like that, versus there's no risk. And that first group is usually hovering around 10%. That's for Center Theater Group patrons, and it kind of mirrors the LA market from what our data set tells us, which is a little bit more conservative, but not hugely, than in the United States. And then that middle trench of if the risk was minimal is about 70 people. So given that our I'd Go Out Tomorrow group is only around 10%, I'm happy to see that you have numbers closer to 40, but I'm really curious about what's kind of going into people's thinking.
Yeah. Well, it is a good question, and what we don't usually break down, or what we don't have a graph for, is the distribution of those answers. I actually meant to add one, so I'm gonna write it down right now. Distribution, because it would be interesting to see how many people are in the 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, for sure. So it's I don't know, Summer, what do you think it's gonna? We're gonna start the new survey actually tomorrow for the mid-June or the mid-July number. Any guesses where do you think it's going to go, up or down from there? You're muted.
I know. Sorry, I was using my space bar. I was working and it stopped. I think that the confidence is probably going to go down a little bit more before it goes back up, based on where we're going with as the positive cases continue to go up and we continue to unfortunately break records. I think that people are starting to take things maybe a little more seriously. Some of the states like ours that might have opened a little early and are now seeing some unfortunate results from that, as people take their restrictions a little more seriously. I think people are staying in a little bit more. Some people have reversed some of their more casual habits. So I think people are going to be a little more reticent for a little longer.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that what's happening is certainly here, but everywhere over the last few weeks is going to have real harmful effects on these numbers. I think and as much of it is a story about how humans are behaving as it is about what the kind of government is doing. So what we've seen is a lot of places opening up, restaurants or bars, and there being protocols and guidelines for how those things should open, and a lot of new sanitation practices, et cetera. And the issue is human compliance more than anything else, it seems, in a lot of places. So we could tell you tomorrow that we found a safe and clean way to open up the theaters that's government approved. And I think the lack of faith in humanity that's kind of spreading around right now was what's going to make those numbers go down.
One of the things that a couple of people mentioned when we did the chat earlier, and that's come up in these chats before, is the whole issue of compliance, right? Like, what a sticky wicket it is when you're running a venue to tell somebody, and we've all seen a million videos on YouTube in that of people who are just like, it's the last thing you want to be dealing with is, somebody who is obviously not worried in any way about the virus, screaming and shouting and, running around the venue and laying hands on people and stuff like that. It's just not a pleasant reality. So, okay, so let's do this. I wanted to get into a couple of issues, and I wanted to invite people, if you're listening in the chat box, please just feel free to ask questions as we go along, and I'll work them in as we go. But I wanted to start, take a little bit of a turn away from sanitation and things like that to engagement. So you both represent institutions that have large bases of engaged patrons for years and years and years and years and years. And typically, the engagement strategy for CTG or the Straz would revolve around what's coming into the venues. And obviously with that not there, and this applies, I think, at every scale, what do you do instead? So when you think about the importance of that engagement, and then how you've had, I guess, good and bad results with different tactics, let's start with that. I think it's something that everybody is curious about, everyone's thinking about. Who'd like to start?
I think a little bit of it, we've stepped away from being super programming specific in the things we're talking about, and have engaged with the community a little bit more. We started taking requests from our fans and finding artists to execute those requests. We
Like
have
what's
done.
an example of that, Summer? I'm curious. Give us an example of what do you mean by a request? And
So we came up with Tampa Total Request Live in the old sort of MTV TRL format.
Nice.
And we came up, we'd put out a theme every week and tell us a song. Mostly it was musical. Tell us a song that reminds you of this or embodies this, and then we'd take all of those. We gathered a pool of artists to sign up in a group. We have over 300 performing artists, mostly musicians, who've signed up to say, I'll take a request when it moves me. And so we throw the requests back to the group, and we select from their submissions, and then we cut it into a little 20-minute program every Wednesday. Now it's every other Wednesday. And so trying to do as much engagement as we can. We've done some community sing-alongs and community dance-alongs where the head of our dance department puts out a brief combination to Dancing Queen, and then we get all these people to do it, and we cut it all together in so people can see themselves singing, see themselves dancing. We've worked for Pride. We worked with our Tampa Bay Gay Men's Chorus to each of them to submit. We cut it all together in one of those virtual chorus, and so things that aren't as specific to us, but how we interact with others, seem to be the things that click and are appreciated the most, get the most engagement and interaction through our social channels, at least.
Meghan, what about you?
Yeah, that sounds really fun, Summer. I have to check that out. So we've been, it's been evolving over the course of the whole couple of months. We started early on with just trying to figure out ways to maintain communication and share out art and lift up artists. So pretty early on, we were sharing out a regular newsletter that had different components. So we've been sharing out scenes from some of our shows. We've been doing an artist creation series, so artisans and other artists that we work with, teaching how to do things like making a mask or stuff at home. We've had a series of panels that we've been putting in for the LA theater community called LA Theater Speaks, where we've been hosting smaller groups of panelists around a topic, artistic directors, those creating digital content, playwrights, which was really exciting. And we have a whole host of education and community partnerships program that we're able to pivot and go online. So we had a big college and career fair and an emerging arts professionals career fair. We have a summer series, which is actually probably the most subscribed online thing that we do, which is working in theater for a working in theater series with different guests, and every week or so, 200 to 300 emerging theater artists tune into that as a part of basically an internship training program, or replacing what that is. So we have all these different areas we're targeting, micro groups. We haven't done any kind of massive efforts yet. We have a lot of things in development that could include larger virtual events, or the thing we do in the parking lot. And part of the barrier right now to the virtual events piece is honestly navigating the union regulations and what we can do. So we're still in active positive communication with the unions about what we can put out there, either that is new or that is streamed that is old. But right now there are a lot of just regulations, age-old regulations that we have to wade through. So that's kind of where we are in the middle of it. But we have a couple of big, exciting things in the work. It's just slow to rebuild all of your programs. Even as one of the largest theater companies, the time it takes to build from the ground up or pivot so many different lines of business while 60% of our staff are furloughed is really complicated.
Yeah, you need their capabilities, and you don't have them, and so it's even all the harder to be able to do that stuff. I actually like to invite anybody who has something they want to share that they've done in their venue or in their organization to put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A, and we'd love to hear about it. So very good. So when I think about engagement, I think one of the questions that's worth asking after the immediate sort of shock of we can't go into the venue anymore is like, what's the goal of the engagement? Is there any way to sort of evaluate or measure the success of that? Do you guys think how do you think about it? Like, what are you looking to see? Summer, you talked about getting a good reaction on social, so that could be measured in engagements and likes or whatever. But is there any, when you guys think about it, like, or anybody really, like, how do we think about knowing when something's successful in that area?
Well, I mean, some of it's, can I tell you, in a year when we try and do a new subscription campaign and get donations to come in, a lot of this is about how we're serving our community and how we're staying relevant and being visible, and how that's about maintaining relationships over time. So if we're like right now, measuring participation, we can measure, but I totally agree with your point. Like, to what's the benchmark or threshold we're looking for? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even think I had a point so much as a question, right? Like it's the same. It's just kind of like, I mean, you know that engagement matters. It's just hard to know, what kind and how much engagement is of value there, right? So it's a good question. I mean, I guess one thing that may not be next year is things like people walking away from subscriptions for people who have subscription series. And the data I've heard on that across the board has been pretty good overall, that there aren't people like rushing for the exits just because there's no shows in, but that could vary from place to place, I suppose.
Yeah, we've been so pleasantly heartwarmed, surprised by the subscription activity. We had launched our Amundsen subscription, which is our biggest one, February, and we were about 26% renewed when we kind of went into the safer at home quarantine mode, and we just passed about when we finished the campaign about 75%, which. Towards that was amazing to us, of people even in that time saying, when you're back, we're back with you, and versus the folks saying, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback of, we'll be back with you, but I'm going to hold on to my money for now, or wait and see. So we've really been told, with the way people are kind of participating with us, that they want to come back, and it's hard to say if continued engagement is necessary to keep them, but even as we continue to cancel and postpone or push out shows, the subscriber loyalty has been really great, and those who have been able to donate have, most of the returns that we've seen requested have been single ticket buyers who were coming out for like that one show that they were compelled to see.
It's interesting because when I think about engagement, it may be one of these really frustrating realities, which is that that if you don't do the engagement work, you will lose people. You will lose their attention. You will lose. But on the other hand, there's no way to point to some specific activity and say, well, that's the thing that kept them in the fold. So I would, I think when people started to think about this a couple of months ago, there were people who talked about the idea of just kind of going silent until you could return to the venue. And I think once you think about that for about 2 minutes, you realize that's a recipe for irrelevance in the future, And so it's that sort of vicious thing of like, you got to do the engagement. You can never really point to, any one thing and say, oh, that post that had whatever fun thing on it is the thing that brought them in. You know what I mean? So it's been interesting on that. We've had actually a few people make some comments that I'll share. Elliot said at Saddleback College, they have launched a summer live at home series where the faculty perform, present art demonstrations, do short dance lessons. That's pretty cool, the faculty. And they're hoping to use it as a springboard into launching paid virtual events in the fall, which I think we'll have more to talk about very soon. So that's pretty cool, right? I mean, like it's a way of getting everybody involved. And Carly mentions that their social media engagement has been a lot higher over the last 4 months, just because people are sort of, I guess, on their phone more, right? They have less to distract them. So,
our engagement on social has been just through the roof. Over the first few months, we were up an average week of like 275%.
Wow.
And so we've been amazed at how much people seem to be. Now, I will say we've seen it dropping off a little bit slowly, and I think maybe people are getting a little burned out on their screens, but we're still seeing numbers that are incomparable to anything we've seen before.
Do you think that's just a question of just fewer things for people to pay attention to?
Well, I think
Or it could be
combination.
more focus on the content too, right? I mean,
Right, because all of our jobs changed one day, and they became content. And as much as we've all said content is king for forever, and we've committed as many resources to that as we can. We aren't able to monetize it, which is exactly what we're saying, right? We're not exactly sure what we get out of it,
right.
and so when you have a $1 million goal on a Broadway show, that's where the focus goes. Instead of, it's not that content's ever been ignored, it's always been a part of what we've done, but it's a good 90% of what all of the marketing and communications teams are focused on.
Right.
We have, everyone's a video editor now, and everyone's learning how to edit sound, and everyone is so everyone's learning new skills and pitching in and to make all of that happen. So I think that's part of it too. You're right for both.
Yeah. Coriana says they've been giving, I'm not sure which venue Coriana's from, but they've been giving shout outs to groups who've performed in their venue and sharing reviews from shows from the season, which I like that because that's another form of just looping people in, right? It's another way of giving somebody some much needed attention particularly if you have a big following. It's pretty cool. I'm sorry. Combs Performing Arts Center in Santan Valley. Did I get that right? I may have gotten that wrong. But anyway, Arizona. As I said, Arizona is well represented today. I saw a comment from Amelia with Niederlander earlier who said that they've done blood drives in the lobby on 3 occasions, which is very cool. I think that's pretty awesome.
There's one going on downstairs for me right now in our offices. Yeah.
Wow.
Rehearsal hall.
Talk about engagement with the community, right? Like it's kind of like you were saying, Summer, when you're not pushing tickets, you can sort of think, okay, what are the ways in which we can just draw people in and be of service, which is pretty good. Other things like that would be super useful, I would think. Like, it seems like there'd be a lot of ways to do that. Erica is asking a question, which I think is a very compelling one. Most of the audience engagement efforts we've heard about, or that we hear about in general, have been focused on streaming or other uses of the internet. And Erica, I'm curious to hear how you're working to connect with audience members who don't really have access so well through that. Is there in-person outreach that's doable, feasible? I mean, I guess the blood drive would be an example of that. What else could you do, I think? And if by the way, if other people have ideas about that, do share them.
Yeah, here we can't. We are talking about what we can do when we're allowed to kind of gather folks. And that does talk about kind of outdoor performance, but I think, which we think, if I had to guess, based on what we're also hearing from the health officials, might come first. So
somebody asked that question. Oh. Do you expect? Let's see. Curious to know if there's a feeling that the government will allow outside concerts first before inside, both being socially distanced, of course. I mean, I think the answer to that is yes.
I think we're hearing about the indoor spread, or even just seeing how they're handling restaurants in terms of outdoor seating versus indoor seating. I very much believe that we'll see some outdoor performance opportunities come up first.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting because we have the good weather now. It would be nice to actually get some of that. I mean, in LA and Tampa, I guess we have good weather most of the time. But although Tampa can be, I mean, let's face it, pretty humid.
Sweltering?
Sweltering, yeah.
Yes. The summer is not the best season to have outdoor events, but I think that people are still, like your survey said, they're still jonesing for something to do. They still, and if it can be done safely, the sooner the better. But we took a more proactive approach where we presented our phased opening plan to the city, not necessarily based on a timeline, but based on certain standards that we were projecting. And first, we put out there the outdoor opening plan and how our virtual classrooms would start first being taught from inside the building, and then how we bring students back on in a socially distanced fashion. And actually, we just started that on Monday. So far, so good. So we've had some campers in the building, which seems to be going well. So those are the really first any outsiders to be in the building in the last, I guess, 3 months, 4 months.
It's interesting. I think when the original sets of reopening plans were made, it was almost based on just time going by. But what you mentioned a minute ago was the idea that we hit some threshold in terms of whatever it is, cases or whatever. How did you guys parse that out, Summer? What were the milestones that you laid out as the indicators that it was okay to move into those phases?
Well, we used a lot of the CDC and government guidelines that came out, and that they would, and much like, I don't know how much to say, the guidelines are not necessarily being followed, at least in our state, right? Based on where the cases are now, they have, these numbers, when they didn't hold for 2 weeks, we should have gone back to phase 1, but we're not going backwards. So our plan is based on sticking to the plans as they were put out by the CDC, which would mean going forward with so much when it's safe and pulling back if in such a time that it didn't, which isn't actually what's happening, but it's what our plan is.
Right. Yeah, that's the part that people, I think, have mistaken, is that if we get to a certain point, the inevitable trajectory is better and better and better. But we've demonstrated very clearly that's not necessarily the case. Sadly, but truly. Well, I mean, I guess that's the thing. Like, what in terms of an end game here, the obviously we talk about vaccine and things like that, but I mean, hard to plan for that kind of unknown, right? So I mean, when you both do a lot of intensive planning for very large budgets, very large organizations, and so people who are joining us today, maybe similar size organizations or smaller or whatever, how do you deal with that amount of uncertainty when it comes to planning? What are some ways that you think of to corral that all those unknowns and still do something?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, right now, I think that it's as much about nimbleness and how you can maintain the ability to be adaptive as anything else. So whatever that means to your organization in terms of who's around, how many people are around, what bandwidth you have, or what you can afford in terms of capacity to be a change agent or to be responsive. At the same time, for everyone, every organization, the finances are so personal to that organization in terms of cash flow and reserves and support from the community. So that's for us the fine math of how do we maintain what is the core of Center Theater Group, and the essence, because I really believe the essence in our companies are in the people. So how can we keep the folks around who can respond to the environment and support artists and put forward things, who are not twiddling their thumbs in the meantime by any means. We've got about 80 different plans on a spreadsheet right now that could go in any different direction. Yeah. And I do mean that there are 80 lines on the spreadsheet. So, but we have to at the same time measure that against how long this could last and how our resources stretch out. So that's the balance we're trying to achieve.
Summer, what would you add to that?
I think that it's similar, really, right? I think it's similar for all of us as far as multiple scenario planning. And, so now on multiple occasions, we've put actual dates to plans, and these are the things that are going to happen, and this is the order in which they're going to happen. And all that has gone out the window multiple times. So a new approach is sort of that I'm working on is, okay, a month from the day that we have this level of clearance, this can happen. Within 2 months of this happening, this is what we can achieve.
Right.
And putting it in that mindset so that we're not, because we just feel like we're chasing our tails after a while, right? And I think it's because we were positive. We felt good that this was going to run its course, and that we'd be back up on our feet. And as we learn new things every day and every day changes, we have to change how we do everything.
Yep.
And so that's my new approach.
Right. Cool. Well, we're just about at the end here, and so I want to thank Summer and Megan for joining us today, and for everybody else who joined us. But I also would love, if there's anything else that you would like to, the other of you would like to, share with the group of people. This is a group of people that is responsible for making a lot of the same kinds of decisions that you are responsible for. If there's anything else you think of that's of value to them, I'd love to have you share it. Megan, anything?
Yes, advocacy. I don't know if you had the New York Times article from yesterday about what's happening in Great Britain shared with you as many times as it was shared with me.
Yep.
But oh my gosh, and any ways that we can band together to really leverage the advocacy on how do we extend unemployment benefits, get a package together for the arts, understand that for us, we will come back the longest and be really hard hit, and our folks don't have somewhere else to make money. That piece alone is where if we could do anything collectively as a group, art will come back in some way, but oh my gosh, we need some help. So, I'm taking as many calls with colleagues as I can, and we're all in different task force, but we need to figure out how to bring together a larger effort. There's some really good stuff out there.
Effort down so that it can actually get somewhere in terms of results. Yeah, that seems to be less easy for us here than in the UK, where they get there quicker, I think, as a society somehow.
It's a big country. We have a lot of complexities.
True. It is more diverse, certainly, from region to region here than it is there. Summer?
Yeah, I'm 100% with the advocacy. That's everything that our industry needs, and I think that it's so unique. And when you hear, at least when we hear our governor speak and talking about reopenings, so movie theaters. There's nothing about actual theaters and the way that our business works, and people, if you can get up to 50% capacity, okay, well, I can't get up to 50% capacity and have people 6 feet apart. Those two numbers don't go together. That gives me about a 25% capacity, and then people aren't considering what has to happen backstage and what has to happen in preparation for a show. People can't get in a shop to build a set. People can't rehearse. Things can't be cast. And I think education, as far as what really goes into putting a show on the stage and getting it from the paper to the audience, any amount of education that helps people understand the realities of our business and why we will be one of the last to get back, yet we're the industry that everyone is turning to for hope, for solace, for comfort. That's where everyone is turning to music and to theater and to books so they're turning to the arts, and yet it's not. So it needs to be financially valued just as much as it's valued apparently in the hearts of everyone.
I think all of that is absolutely right. And I would add that when we really get to the point where we can reopen and people can go out and do things again, what are they going to do? Right? We know they'll go to restaurants, we know they'll go to bars, but when you think about what people do, when you talk about going out and doing something, you're talking about going and listening to music or seeing a show or, one of those things. I think that the role of live events, entertainment, and arts is very much the bringing together the fabric of the cities that we live in. And when that we've seen over history, when that fabric is not complete because it's not a robust or a healthy scene, the city itself suffers. And that's something that I think is underplayed and undervalued and should be paid more attention to. And hopefully it will. So I hope that you're both successful in the advocacy side of it. Speaking of which, everybody knows on this group that the Facebook group on Facebook is called Show Up. Go there. There's hundreds of people there. We share all the resources. There's the link in the chat right now. We share the resources from the surveys. We share the replays of this, and people are sharing just bits of information and organizing a bit through that. So do go and join that group and participate, and I think it's worth your time. So that'll just about do it for us. So I want to thank Megan and Summer for joining us today. Very, very, very nice to be able to hear get the benefit of all of your thoughts and expertise and many years of doing this. So thank you for that. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. We're back on July 22nd. Yes, we'll be back on July 22nd with new survey data, more experts, more perspective, hopefully a better number. Hopefully somehow we're pushing in the right direction by then. We'll see. I don't know. We'll find out. But as I've said many times, this whole thing is going to be a process of a very wiggly, eventually upward line. The fact is that we will get back into venues and this will return. Live entertainment and arts, theater, everything else will return. That's never going to change. It may be enhanced in a lot of ways. Our job is to get there and to remember that there's going to be all kinds of moments of excitement, perhaps unjustified excitement, and there's going to be moments of reversals, and there's going to be moments of pessimism that are also not justified. So if you can just kind of bear that in mind as we push through this, it might help, because you step back and take the long view, as I think Summer and Meghan are talking about, taking a long view. You will, I think, see that there's a good picture to be painted, but a lot of challenging stuff between now and then. So we'll all do the best to support each other and share information and do everything we can. So until the 22nd, we'll see you on the Facebook group and elsewhere. Bye, everybody.
Encore